Today we're going to be building a GitHub action, which is something that GitHub launched in beta a little while ago, and it allows you to run arbitrary pieces of code on a push to a repo whenever a pull request is made and whenever a deployment fails, anything like that. And today we're going to be building an action for Nexmo Developer. And Nexmo Developer is our documentation site for Nexmo, and it covers how to send SMS, make voice calls, that kind of thing. But with a project like this, we've got so much content that it's constantly moving. Files are getting moved and renamed, and sometimes we forget to add a redirect, so any existing links start to fail. So in today's action, anytime a pull request is raised, we're going to check our redirects config, and if there isn't an entry in there for a file that was renamed, we're going to fail the build. To do this, we're going to use a couple of tools. The main one is actions-toolkit by a guy called Jason Ector, and this is a Node.js library that abstracts all of the moving parts of a GitHub action, make sure that you're listening for the right event. It automatically configures an octokit instance, so you can make requests to the GitHub API. It handles logging commands, and also accesses all of the data that GitHub provide in the action. So when an action runs, they write all of the information about that event to a file on disk, and this library automatically loads that and makes it available to you. GitHub has a lot of different event types. So check run event, check suite event, when repos are forked, when labels are changed, when an issue is raised. But today we're going to be working with the pull request event, because we only want to check if there's a redirect missing when the pull request is either opened or synchronized. And synchronized is triggered when we push new commits to an open PI. So with that in mind, the easiest place to start is by configuring a workflow, which is how we tell GitHub which actions to run. And I'm going to be working on my Nexmo Developer fork. Let's do this. So I've got my repo is forked, it's up to date with the latest from the master copy on the Nexmo organization. And git remote sv. I have my fork set up here. So this project has a lot of GitHub actions already. We use it for automatically deploying things like review apps. But just to simplify today, I'm going to delete all of those. And the workflow is defined in the .github folder in a file called main.workflow. So yeah, we create review apps, we automatically delete branches on pull request merge, and anytime there's a deployment failure, we automatically append the deployment logs from Heroku. So I'm just going to clear that out, and all I want to do for now is have this debug workflow. And this uses one of the official actions. So the way that this works is you have a workflow and an action. So a workflow is triggered on a specific event, and it resolves an action or multiple actions. Here the relationship is just one-to-one. Whenever there's a pull request, I want to use the debug action. So I'm going to push that up, just so it's running in the background. And I will show you the debug action. So there is a big warning here. It will expose any secrets that it has access to. This is not a good thing. You could be giving away GitHub auth tokens and things like that. Fortunately, our action doesn't have access to any secrets, But this is how you use it. You have a workflow and an action like we used, and it gives you some example output. So these are all environment variables that GitHub will set. And then if you read GitHub event path, it gives you a path to a file, and then that contains loads of information about the event itself. So if I refresh this, we're one commit ahead, and I do not have any actions. It's because I'm not signed in. Let me just sign in. I will be back in 1 second. Probably shouldn't show you all of this, but I am still here. So GitHub. Almost there. And my two-factor authentication code. Excellent. And we're back. So now we can see we have this Actions tab. So I click in there. We can see that we get an invalid workflow. And this happens occasionally. So because GitHub Actions is still in beta, things are a little bit hit and miss on whether the workflow will actually run. I can show you a debug from when I was testing a little while ago. So debug on pull request, and I can click into the log. And the way that it works, everything runs in Docker. So it pulls the Docker image, configures it all, and then here's the output, like we saw in the debug repo, all of the environment variables, the ref, the name of the branch, the GitHub repo, and then we get this event file. So this is that a pull request was opened. Lots of links and information about the pull request itself, about the base branch, which is the branch that we want to merge into, the head branch, the head commit, which is the commits that the most recent commit that we want to merge in, information about the user that did it, so me, information about the repository. Like, there's a ton of information in here. So I think the reason that it said invalid workflow is that there is nothing in here on push, which is the event that we just triggered. So instead, I'm going to create a pull request. I committed directly to master. Let's create a new branch. I'm just going to call it tutorial rename, and I'm going to rename one of our guides. So from secret management to credential management. That's renamed. So rename secret to credential management. Git push tutorial rename. So now I can create a new pull request on GitHub by visiting this page. And there we are, it actually worked this time. So add a little description. Well, we do not want to add it to the base Nexmo repository, we want to do it to our own fork. And now we see that only that one commit exists. Rename secret to credential in count section, and there are no deploy notes, but I'm just going to delete that section. So if I create that pull request, hopefully the GitHub action that we configured, that debug one, is happening. And of course there's someone at the door. So sorry, give me 1 second, it is the postman. Hey, sorry about that. So there's a question in the chat asking, is there a way to understand more about what's going on in a particular invalid workflow, or is it just something internal at GitHub due to the beta status? There's nothing that I've been able to find. I've had a couple of conversations with GitHub support, and the response was, is it still happening? Like, give it a go a few days later, and it wasn't, which leads me to believe that it's just a beta thing. We can see here that this one did actually succeed, so my inclination is that the workflow is invalid for the event that we sent, which was a push. But now that we've raised a pull request, we can see all of the information that builds the image, like always. It's pull request number 3. It's by me. The body is renames credential in account section, which is what we typed in. The head is a commit. It's got this show, which if we go back to this and change to our tutorial branch, 0029 D45, 0029 D45. Yeah, that's the same commit. So we've configured our repo, we've configured the workflow, and we've actually got all of the information we need here. So you can test this by making changes and keep pushing up to GitHub and seeing what happens. But that's quite an ineffective way to build actions. Fortunately, there is a tool called Act, and Act lets you run your GitHub Actions locally. And the way that this works is you provide it with a file full of JSON. I generally call it event.json, and that's what it copies into the Docker image. And that's what all of this is for. So I'm going to copy this into a file in a minute. But before we do that, we need to get started with building our action. So if I go back to the repo, you can specify external GitHub repos, anything you want. For simplicity, I'm just going to add it directly to this repo for now, and I will extract it later. So you can create all of this by hand. I like to use the actions toolkit npm module to bootstrap my action. So to do that, I run npx actions toolkit and then the name of the action that we want to build. And npx is quite cool. It's built into npm, which is the JavaScript package manager, or the Node package manager, and it will run binaries that you don't currently have installed. It'll automatically download them, run them. So what's the name of my action? File name, rename, redirects, show description, check for missing redirects on Nexmo Developer. Choose an icon. What kind of icon? Check? Check circle. Yeah, why not? And I like orange. So that's created that folder, file rename redirects, and it's created all the files, including a Docker file, which we'll take a look at in a minute. I'm just going to cd back into that directory, and I'm going to run npm install because that might take a minute, and it can run in the background. So it's created these 4 files. It even creates a test file for you. I don't tend to do much with this because it doesn't feel representative to me, in that it doesn't actually run it through a Docker image. So I'm just going to remove that for now, which leaves us, it was 3, but now we've got 5 because we've got our node modules and our package lock. So I'm going to start with the Docker file. You can run any code you like in a GitHub action. Here we're running Node.js, so we use the Node Slim, or you can specify a specific version. we don't really care about that. We're just going to use the latest version of Node. Then we've got a couple of labels which GitHub uses in their UI. So that's icons, colors, descriptions, things like that. We copy our package, JSON and package lock into the Docker container and then install all of our dependencies. And then we use npm CI rather than npm install here. And that's to make sure that it installs from package lock, so you always get a consistent version of the dependencies. Then copies in the rest of our action and it runs index.js, which looks like this. So it just requires actions-toolkit and then it says run. And it's an async method, which means we can use async await. And by default, it just exits with the success and saying, hey, we did it. I'm going to run this just to make sure that our action is configured correctly. So we need to actually configure our action. So in main.workflow, I'm going to get rid of debug. So I'm just going to call it redirect check. And it resolves redirect check. And it uses, what did I call it? File rename redirects. So like I said, this can be a path to a Docker image, a GitHub repo. If it was a GitHub repo, we'd have to give it a commit hash or a branch name, but as it's local in the same folder, we don't have to. And this should be enough to test. So I mentioned this tool called act, and the way that you run it is you just run act and then the event name. So act pull request. When I do this, it uses GitHub ref tutorial rename, which is our branch name, and it goes off and it builds the Docker image. So this is going to take a second whilst it pulls down the node image and all the base layers whilst it runs npm install. It'll take a little while the first time, but on subsequent runs all of the top layers will be cached, and this is actually quite important. So file rename Docker file. The way that Docker works, if you're not familiar, is it starts right at the top and it downloads the image, then it copies this, and then it runs npm CI, then it copies our file, our project files, and this actually builds up a set of layers. So if our package JSON ever changes, anything above it won't re-execute, but everything below it will. And this setup's pretty good, because it means that anytime our action changes, we don't end up reinstalling our node modules or anything like that. We just copy the action code again and then re-execute. So that built, it ran, and we did it. That's pretty cool. I think it's going well, but that's just a very generic action. What we actually want is to read some of this information from this event. So I'm just going to take this, I'm going to copy it into event.json, and we'll delete this afterwards. But what that allows us to do is pass that event.json into act, and it will get copied into the GitHub action. And you can access that within your action. So it comes through as tools.context. So tools.context is all the environment variables and the file. And the file is actually called payload. So I'm just going to open up event.json. Let's use action to start with. So it'd be tools.context.payload.action. And I'm going to, equals 2. And I'm just going to add a log message. And actions-toolkit has some logging helpers, so logging, and it uses a tool called Signal, which is quite a cool logging utility. It's not one that I had used before I started building GitHub Actions, but you see you get lots of nice colors and different log levels. And the options are, let's add this as a info, pending, like, let's go for, come on, what is it? Timers, configuration. See, it's quite configurable, this project. Where's the levels? I'm not seeing it. I'm just going to use info. So to use that, tools.log.info. So I'm going to use the backticks because I want a template string. So pull request state is action. And if I go back and rerun using act, and it's going to take a second to rebuild again, not quite as long as last time. But what act is doing here is it's preventing the need for us to just keep pushing updates. So imagine having to commit and push to GitHub and commit and push to GitHub and wait for them to execute it every time. So here we get our log message, our pull request state is opened. And that's all of the setup. Right, that's all the workflow configuration. It's bootstrapping an action, and it's making it do something other than the default. So now it's time to actually build our action. And I've been thinking about this before this stream, and I wrote myself a couple of notes just so I know what all of the different steps are. So, nope, that isn't what I wanted. Let's go back to here and add my comments. So there's a couple of things we want to do with this action. We want to make sure that we're operating on a pull request and that it's either an opened or a synchronized event, and if not, neutral exit. And a neutral exit is that it wasn't successful, it wasn't a failure, it's just something that we don't really know how to handle. And all of this is documented in the GitHub docs, so exit codes and statuses. So exit status of 0 is a success, the action completed successfully, and any other tasks that depend on it can begin. And that's important because you can actually have actions that depend on other actions. And if an action completes, you might want to go to the next step. For example, if you're linting your code, you might also have a build step, but you only want to run that if the linting succeeds, if the testing succeeds, so that will need a success. Exit status 78, I'm not too sure why they chose 78, but that's neutral, which is, it didn't fail, but that's where we should stop the workflow. Any additional actions after that won't run, it's just we can't get past this point. And then any other code is considered a failure, and that shows up in the pull request as a build failure. After that, we're going to cache any common variables that we need. Actually, we're going to do that first. Indentation, there we are. So that's things like action. So instead of accessing tools.context.payload over and over, I'm just going to cache all the variables that we need right at the top. Once we've done that, we're going to fetch the changes between the branch that we're trying to merge into and the tip of our PI and work out all of the different changes. Because unfortunately, event.json doesn't tell us what's changed. yeah, it just tells us about the pull request itself. It doesn't give us information about the files. So we'll use the GitHub API to access that. If any of the file statuses are renamed, they actually give us the previous file name, so we need to build up a list of all the renamed files. After that, we want to load files within Nexmo Developer, so we should have access to the files in the project. I need to check that actually, otherwise this just isn't going to work. Once we've got the redirect files, if each rename has an entry, that's fine, and if it doesn't, push it into an array. And then if we have any entries without a redirect, fail the build. So quite a few moving parts. But let's go back to Actions Toolkit, because checking that we're on the right event is quite a common thing. So you can pass in a list of events that this action is valid for. So this is the constructor method. We actually use toolkit.run, which gives us an async function to execute in. So you pass it as the second parameter. So here we only want to execute on pull request. So that's the first part. And the second part is action. So we want to, if it's not opened or it's not synchronized. So if we give it a list, so opened and synchronized, and then we look for whatever was passed in. And that should be equals, so equals -1. So if we couldn't find action in that list, we want to exit. So failure, tools.exit.failure. I'm just going to give it a little error message. So going to change this. So expected actions. Expected one of, and I'm going to use the template variable again here. So expected actions dot join. So expected one of opened, comma synchronized, got action. So now we're starting to add some of these like guide clauses into our action. And at this point I'm just going to say running again in the background just to make sure that it's still working. So given that our event.json action is opened, I'd expect this to work fine. And that means we should get to the bottom and say we did it. And it won't, because I've got an extra comma. And this is why I like to run things in the background periodically. But you see it's running much faster now. Like it's not pulling down the base node image or anything like that. So it runs our image. Can I access action before initialization? Okay, this is an interesting one. Const action. This is not one that I've had before, but line 6. That's because I had this log message where it's referencing action, but we actually define it underneath. So I'm just going to delete that log line and run it one more time. Here we are. There we did it. So everything went through fine. And if I go to event.json and change that to just say demo instead of opened or synchronized, we should actually get an error message. And hopefully you can see now how acts can be quite powerful, so that you don't have to keep pushing to GitHub. If you want to tweak it, you can just change. So expected one of open synchronize got demo. That's exactly what we wanted to see. So I'm going to undo that, and I'm actually going to change it here, so that instead of a pull request, we're going to run push. And the reason that that did nothing is because there were no push events in the action. So if we take a look at main.workflow, we only do it on pull request. And you might be thinking, why do I have to set it in both the workflow and the GitHub action itself? But let me just change this to push and run it again. So it's actually detected that there's a push event now, and it builds it and it runs it. And now our action says the event push.opened is not supported by this action. It's just making sure that our actions are being used in the way that we would expect. I'm going to change that back to pull request now, because that's how we want it to work, and we can go back to building. So now that we've ensured that our action is running with the right parameters, the right context, we need to fetch the changes between head and base. So base is the branch that we're merging into, head is the most recent commit on our pull request. We can get that information. Head, so this is a field within the payload. We get labels, refs, information about the repo, things like that. But what we actually want is not about the owner, show. So this is the commit hash of the most recent commit. So this will be tools context payload head.show, and actually base comes before head, just in my head. So now we've got these two common variables, and I'm going to add just another info log actually. So I need to go back and pull that out again. And I like to do this when I'm building actions, just lots and lots of logging. So base is and head is and semicolons are important. So now if I run this again, it should start reading more information out of that event file. And we should see two log levels before it says we did it. I'm just showing us the base show, the head show. Cannot read property short of undefined. Excellent. I've misread some indentation somewhere. So I'm going to use a tool called JQ. It's really nice. It's a JSON formatter, but you can also navigate. So there is no base in there. So what's it in? Is it under the pull request key? Pull request .base. Yes, it is. So these are the kind of mistakes that I've made over and over. But now that should exist. As you can see, it's quite an iterative process. You say, okay, I'm just going to build it up a little bit, I'm going to run, I'm going to build it up a little bit more, I'm going to run. And there we are, we've got our two commits that we're going to be working with. And as I mentioned, there's no information about the files within this pull request, so we have to go out and use the Github API. And we do that using a library called tools.workspace. Let's look at the documentation. AutoKit's a node library, and what actions-toolkit will do is it will actually pull this in for you and automatically configure it with the GitHub API token. And it can do that because every time an action runs, GitHub give it an API token with limited scope just to the current repo, but you can use that for asking more questions. So I'm looking for renamed. Compared to commits, based on the head. There we are. For example, files with a rename status have a previous file name field. That's exactly what I wanted. So this is the method that I want. And we need to pass in a couple of things. So the repo owner, the repo name, the base, and the head. So that will be base jar, and this will be head jar, and we also need to pull out owner and repo. So back to our event file, and we just take a quick look. Actually, let's use jq.owner. No, so the owner isn't actually within the pull request. It's not at the top level. So where is this actually coming from? Okay, so the owner is in the base field. And I'm imagining there's also one in the head. Yeah. So this is set up like this because it could be a pull from one fork back into the main repo, and the repo has different owners. I'm going to choose just one of them. No, actually I'm not. I'm going to use repository. So I don't actually care about base and head, because I know I'm working within the same repo. I can just use .repository, and it should be name and owner. So name is there, and owner.login. Repository owner.login shows me what I need, repository name. And those are the two things that I need to pass in here. So owner, payload, repository, owner.login, and repo is repository.name. Now I'm using a newish feature of JavaScript here where if the variable name is the same as the key in an object, you can just specify it once. So just having owner here is the same as doing owner : owner. So we've got all the variables that we need to pass in. It's automatically configured with an access token. Another thing we have to change is AutoKit, because that doesn't exist in this context, because it's actually configured as tools.github and compare commits. And because we're in an async function, I can use await on compare commits. And I'm actually just going to console log changes. So I'm not going to use the built-in logging stuff because I'm going to delete this afterwards. But I'm interested to see what comes back from the API once this is running. So Docker build, it's copying all of our project files across, it runs it. Bad credentials. Yes. So I said GitHub automatically put a GitHub token into the workspace for you. To do that, you need to tell it that you want that credential. So I can't remember if it comes in workflow or action. So GitHub Actions secrets. It has good secret support. So you commit this to the repo, but it's not in plain text. You do it all through the web UI. Storing secrets, that's not what I want. Creating a GitHub action. I can't remember, and I've just had an idea of what the best way to show you this will be. So if we go into actions, we can do view main.workflow. And they've actually got this UI where you can edit things. So I need to be on a branch. Use our tutorial rename branch. And if I click edit, they've got this nice UI where you can create new workflows and drag and drop and then enter things. It's really quite cool. Or you can go in and edit the file directly like we were doing earlier. I'm actually just going to add a secret, which is on the action, not the workflow. You can see GitHub token is automatically available. You can create your own secrets here and give it a name and things like that. I'm going to ignore these changes because I'm going to do it locally and push it all up later. But you can see the secrets line in the action. So now I've got that. When I run act, it's going to detect that there's a missing secret and ask me to provide a value for that. So just like before, I'm going to hide away my screen whilst I go and grab a GitHub access token. I've got one locally. Okay. That's not what I wanted to do. Close that. And now I've got, instead of presenting it to act every time, I've actually loaded GitHub token into my environment. So if I run it this time, it doesn't prompt. It automatically reads my shell environment. And here we are. So it made the API request. This is the URL that it called. We've got some headers back and loads of data about the base commit, the merge base, commits and files. And instead of digging into this in code, I've got a tool called Po, which is a HTTP client that I like using, and I've configured this with the request that we just made. So we're going to be merging into master from tutorial rename. We can see all of that information comes back, information of the base commit, the committer, parents, the merge base commit like we saw. But what's really interesting is this files section at the end, which you cannot see because of my face. Let's try this again. So this file section here, where it gives us the commit, the file name, the status. As we can see, we've got this previous file name because it was a file that was renamed. So previous file name and file name are the two things that we're interested in to actually add the redirect, and the status is the thing that we're going to look at. So this came back within a data key, so it's changes.data.files. I'm just going to run that in the background to double check. I'm pretty sure that it's correct. So I'm going to store it, building up that list. So let's add it under the right comment. Data files. So for each file in changes.data.files, if the file status was renamed, wasn't it? Renamed. Then let's create a new array. Changed files.push, and we want from, and that was previous file name, and that's 2. I put those for debug as well. So that is what I was expecting to see. It's a list of objects with the status that we're checking, the old file name and the new file name. Now, within Nexmo Developer, everything lives in this underscore documentation folder, but that gets stripped off when we render it online. So the URLs that you see on Nexmo Developer are identical to the paths on disk. So if you wanted to view this file, you just go to developer.nexmo.com/account/guide/credential management. So I'm going to remove that and just run just to see what shows up in our list of changed files. Cool, so we've got our from, we've got our to. We actually want to strip off documentation from the beginning and .md from the end. I'm just going to write a little function here. So this is path to URL. So how many characters do we want to cut off the front? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14. So we'll cut 14 off the end, off the front, and then we need 3 off the end. And I always forget how to do this. Remove extension Java, not Java, JavaScript. I can use negative index. Of course I can. So it's from 0 to -3. So that is saying take the first 14 characters, which is the underscore documentation, and then slice off the last 3. So this should be path to URL, and this should be path to URL. And let's just double check if that worked. So this should just return the URL that we'd view on Nexmo Developer now. And there we are. We've got 2 paths. Love it when things work as I expect. So this is where things get a little bit less clear, because we need to load all the redirect files from Nexmo Developer. So Github Actions workspace, file system. So Github workspace, repository, no, it doesn't actually put your project into the workspace at first glance, but that's fine because we can use the API to get the file. So this will be files, what would this be under? You can tell this is the bit that I've not done before now. Repos maybe? No, that's list all public repos. What could this be? Logging, debug, checks, Git maybe? Get a blob. Create a blob, get commit. We're getting closer. Get tag, getting further away. do it the cheap way. Contents. Let's search for contents on there. And no, I've lost that tab. Execute with SJS, that's what I was on, isn't it? Get contents for file directory. See, Twitch chat helping all the way. So Octokit repos, get contents. So just like before, we're just going to load one redirect file for now. Nexmo Developer has a couple, but we'll just load one to check. So const directs. So we've got owner and repo just like before, and the path we need to pull from Nexmo Developer. So let's close that. And our redirects live in the config folder in the redirects file. So the path is config redirects.yaml. I'm just going to log that out to double check that it works. I'll show you the format of this whilst we wait. So this is just a big YAML file, what the old URL was and what the new one was. And see, we've got 151 entries in here. Oh, unexpected token. What did I do wrong? Which line was that on? 46. Because I have to put a string. That was path, I believe. Yeah, that was path. So I just put a string in there and forgot to give it a key. So let's try that again. And hopefully now we should just get a big block of YAML data. Okay. We didn't. We got a lot of text, which is base64 encoded. So it's .data.content. And this can be base64 decode. Encoding, decoding. Okay, so I need to create a new buffer. That's fine. So we create a new buffer with that content saying it's base64. Then we render that as ASCII. And then we log out those redirects. And once we get this as YAML, now we're going to need to parse it. So Node.js parse YAML. I'll load this YAML module. And it's just YAML.parse. Excellent. Redirects has already been declared. And that is correct. Actually, I'm going to keep that one there. I'm going to rename this one to be redirect contents. So it's running, it's making the API requests. As you build up more of an action, they take longer and longer to actually run. But cool, we did it. We have all of this YAML, which is exactly what we needed. So we're going to install YAML, but not in this folder. In file, rename redirects. we need to import that as well. And I think it was just called YAML. Yeah. And then we've got YAML.parse. So actually, I'm going to feed that straight in. So YAML.parse. And now redirects should be an object. Taking its time this time. The reason it's taking its time, I've just realised, is because we modified this file, which is higher up in the stack, which means it has to run npm-ci and reinstall all of our dependencies again. So again, it's going to take just a little bit longer. We've got it, and now it's an object. So we have everything that we need. So now we can go through our renames, so changed files. Change of changed files. If not, redirects change.from. So we're saying if the redirects file doesn't have an entry for the old file name, let's add an errors list. I'm just going to push the to and the from into errors, and actually I'm going to format that more nicely. I'm going to do change.from, change.to, and then if errors.length, we want to tools.exit.failure, not a success. Missing redirects, and that will be errors. I'm just going to put them on new lines. I should add a couple of new lines here as well. And we now to no missing redirects. So now for the moment of truth. It's been exactly an hour. We started out with nothing. We've bootstrapped an action, set up a testing framework. We cached all of the variables that we needed. You'll find that you use these same 5 quite a lot. So the base, the head, the repository owner, and the action. Added a guard clause to our action to make sure that it executes with just the right events. Add a little bit of debug info. Worked out what changes there are. Loaded files through the GitHub API. Checked that each change has an entry in that redirects file, and then errors if not. And here we have a missing redirect, so we didn't create one for account guides secret management, which was renamed to account guides credential management, which is exactly what we wanted. Now we're almost there. We're not quite there because there's one more thing to do, and that's to do with getContents, because at the moment I would expect that getting contents is actually looking at the master branch. We actually want it to look at the branch that we're raising the pull request from. So we need to pass this ref. So if I go back and I pass in ref, and I want this to be the head commit, and this is still going to fail because we haven't actually added the redirect yet. Run, and I missed a comma. Let's try that again. I'm actually just going to open up config redirects, ready to add a redirect. Missing redirects, excellent. So actually I'm just going to copy that, I'm going to add it to the end. So from this file to this file, and it's important to note that you have to commit things for Act to pick it up. You can't get things onto GitHub without committing it, so it doesn't work with unstaged changes or anything like that. So I'm just going to add that. I'm missing redirect. And now for the moment of truth. This should hopefully complete. This is all live. Like, I've never built this before today. I'm just building based on my experience with GitHub Actions and the GitHub API. It's still not worked. Okay, I'm going to leave this one as an exercise for you because we're 3 minutes over. I wanted to get this wrapped up in an hour. Hopefully you've seen how to get started with GitHub Actions, what kind of things you need to be considering, how to test, what libraries are useful. There's a question, would it be better to automatically add any missing redirects rather than fail to build? You could. What's quite nice about GitHub Actions is if you make any changes using the GitHub token that you're given in an action, that then doesn't trigger any more actions, so you can't get stuck in an infinite loop. So theoretically you could automatically add the redirect rather than fail to build, but for me adding the redirect is a conscious choice. It's something where you might not want to add a redirect, and then if you deleted it and then it added it back and then you deleted it, you get stuck in that loop. So we'd have to add something in here at the beginning, and say something like if payload dot body contains hash no redirects check. So you could conditionally disable it based on commit messages or the pull request message or anything like that. But for me, adding redirects is something that we should be doing automatically. Sorry, not automatically. It should be point by process. It's a process problem that we would then be trying to solve with tech, and I don't think that's the right solution. With that, that brings us to the end of our stream. I hope you found it useful. I definitely did, and I'm probably going to try and find some time this afternoon to try and resolve that final issue where we try and load the redirects. I know why it is. This should work. It is the right ref, but we're using the GitHub API, and that redirect doesn't exist. Let me just push this up. So I just want to see if it works now. Just to double check, because it feels like that should work. I didn't. Okay, I'm going to go and try and work this out. I recommend that you do too. It's quite fun to play around. I need to have a look at how the getContents method works as well. Yeah, hopefully you enjoyed the stream and found it useful. I definitely enjoyed it, so hopefully see you again next week. Cheers.